Why do so many of us know exactly what we have to do to change, yet it doesn't happen? In today's video, I'm going to answer that question, the key underpinning reason why so many of us struggle to make the changes we wish to make. As someone who has worked in the field of psychology since 2003, I can attest to my own personal experience around gathering many pieces of understanding and knowledge, and yet still not seeing the kinds of changes that I wanted to see in my life until I discovered a very important factor, which seems very obvious because really I look back at my early training and think that this aspect should have been emphasized a bit more. It was only about 2/3 of the way through my career, around really 2017, that I really discovered the missing piece. And it's very obvious now, and I think you'll hear a lot about the mind and this reference made in a lot of areas these days, which is this. This is the reason why. It's all about what's in control here, what's running the show. We think or believe or are led to believe that the conscious mind is running things. And it's not. It never was. It never will be. And that is the place where so many of us come to believe that we will make the change from. That if we just think, if we plan, if we put in more effort, more structure, understand ourselves more, that the change will flow. And I'm not saying that change can't come from here at all, but it is much harder to make change using the conscious mind as the primary driver of varying what's going on for us that isn't working. So this is the diagram that I use quite regularly with my clients, and it's one that hopefully will help make sense of things for you, in that the conscious mind, if we really understand what it's doing, it's your thinking, it's your analysis, it's your logic, and it does its best really to use logic, analysis, problem solving, planning, etc. to help us out and navigating the world. But look at this. The reason that this iceberg metaphor is so fitting is because of how much of the mind is actually running outside of our conscious awareness. And that's for very good reason. We need to have an autopilot running. So for example, if I had to think of every breath I took or every footstep I took, then I wouldn't be able to do anything other than breathe or focus on taking one step after another. So the unconscious mind needs to take over all of that. On this diagram, I'm focusing more on the psychological aspects of the subconscious and unconscious. But yes, your unconscious, it walks for you, so you don't have to think about it. As I said, breathing is happening unconsciously. Yes, we can consciously breathe as well, but as soon as we stop thinking about it, we're back to unconscious breathing. So we need this, running everything in the background. Your unconscious mind will know not to put a hand in the fire or stay away from the fire, because that's a rule we learnt early on, and that links to what I've listed here, which is the beliefs that govern the way we operate in the world are being run by the unconscious mind. As I said, a belief around safety, don't put your hand in the fire, don't step out in front of a car. That's part of what we learn early on in life, but the beliefs that are really affecting us on a day-to-day basis are actually more to do with our emotional safety. And that's this 0 to 7 period that is very crucial in forming these beliefs because of this down the side, the way the brainwave frequencies develop throughout childhood. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then our emotions, they sit subconsciously. They reside there. We talk about having emotional baggage, etc. The emotions are sitting outside of conscious awareness. Yes, they spill out into our conscious life and we experience them consciously, but they effectively live here underneath the surface. And so when you look at this subconscious, unconscious, the emotions, the beliefs that are really driving things, and the beliefs influence how we feel things and what emotions we carry. And as I said, that spills out into how we behave in everyday life or how we think automatically. And just to go back to what I stated a moment ago around the brainwave patterns, we are developing through these patterns up until around about the age of 7 and beyond. Beta brainwave activity starts to kick in. So prior to that, we're in delta from around 0 to 2. So delta, it's a phase where we're picking up the basics. We have to learn how to walk and how to talk. So we're in this very spongy, almost hypnotic type state in order to get the building blocks for moving around in the world and communicating. And if you look at how we as children take on language or learn the basics of language, we don't have to do a lot of repetition. Say, for example, learning to drive a car requires a lot of conscious repeat. Then at some point it'll become more of a subconscious behavior that we don't have to really think about, and it will sink into the subconscious, something that's repeated enough. But when we're very young, we don't have to learn through repetition as much. We're much spongier and can take on the words and just start effectively spitting out words. So in this 0 to 2 phase, we need to feel safe and we need to feel loved. If in this early phase of life there's a disturbance in that, let's say you had the cord wrapped around your neck at birth, or which is a safety disturbance, or your mother was postnatally depressed or just unavailable. Those felt experiences early in life, even though we have no recollection of them, are already potentially forming the basis of an unconscious belief pattern. This is why people who have been adopted out at birth often later on will have a sense of being sensitive to abandonment and belonging, etc., because even though they don't have any recollection of it, deep down there's an unconscious sense of abandonment that's been locked in. Around about 2 to 5, theta brainwave activity comes online, or around about age 2, and this phase is more around having a sense of agency, having a sense of awareness that we can choose how to behave. We need to at some point figure out that we are responsible for ourselves. So it's a very egocentric type of a phase when we, as children, can decide for ourselves what we wish to do. We may just follow what the parents or the caregivers tell us to do, or we may push back, which is why children in this phase can sometimes be known as having the terrible 2 tantrums, 2 or 3 tantrums, because there's this sense of I want, or a referencing back to the self as the primary way of operating. the downside of this being that you or we relate everything back to ourselves at this stage. And so we take everything very personally and we start to form rules about how we fit into the world. So if in this phase, for example, we don't get availability from a parental figure and maybe they're not very emotionally tuned in, then we can start to take on the idea that, oh, I mustn't be worthy of love and I have to do more to earn it. So these are the sorts of self-referencing rules and beliefs that get taken on board at this early stage and become locked into the personality. Alpha's the bridge. So by the time we hit around about age 5, alpha is a phase where we're starting to, that's why I've got it straddling the waterline a bit there. Alpha is where we're starting to learn cause and effect. So maybe if we're at school, we might know that if we break the rules, we'll get sent out of the classroom, maybe get sent to the principal's office. But we don't necessarily understand exactly why talking is bad. We don't see that it's disrupting the class or understand the bigger picture, because that only kind of kicks in around about age 7-ish, when beta brainwave activity starts to form. And it even at age 7, it hasn't formed fully. It's just started to create more of a filter in terms of us being able to see the big picture, being able to analyze and understand things from our own perspective. It's really closer to pre-puberty and puberty that we really get beta brainwave activity reaching a peak, and we're much more able to decide for ourselves. For example, a lot of teenagers will start to really take their parents down off a pedestal at this age and see the flaws and the faults in them as human beings, which is healthy and necessary. But in alpha, we're still, as children, we're still in an imaginary play phase. We need imaginary play or need imagination to be the starting point for bringing an idea into the world. So before something becomes acted upon, we need the inspiration that sparks it, and that comes from alpha, the imagination. Any epiphany or great idea you have had as an adult or as a child has come from alpha or deeper. It has not come from this state. It has not come from your conscious mind. Your conscious mind or your analytical mind will then put it into action or figure out what the practical steps are to bring that into life. But the inspiration, the spark, the imagination, the creativity, that comes from here. So that is why this 0 to 7 is so pivotal, and these beliefs that we're forming early in life, that is our default mechanism. That is what we autopilot back to, and is what makes change so hard for us, because let's say, for example, you decide that you want to be more assertive and have a voice in the world, yet there's a belief that you formed early on that said it wasn't safe to be seen and heard. That belief will push back. The underneath part is bigger and more powerful than the tip. I'm not saying you won't be able to get yourself to assert yourself and have a voice, but you'll get pushback generally. It'll feel very uncomfortable, and maybe there'll be guilt afterwards or fear afterwards after you've stood up for yourself or expressed yourself, depending on how extreme the belief is or strong the belief is, because we're all carrying different intensities of these beliefs and how strongly they're embedded. So it's not the same for each person that runs that belief. But nevertheless, it can take a lot of conscious effort to overcome a belief like that, a lot of repetition before that belief might be less of a barrier. And Yeah, and then there's the emotional baggage as well that gets triggered and activated by certain circumstances. So it's certainly language that a lot of us use, that I got triggered or had this, overreaction to a certain experience, and that is potentially from either source, from these beliefs or from these emotions that have not been processed or have laid dormant, being activated, and again make it hard to behave the way you'd like to behave or make the changes you'd like to make. And the good news is, I guess, to wrap this video up, is we only need to access an alpha brainwave state as a way of working with what's going on underneath the surface here. The beliefs, the emotions, the parts of us that are imbalanced. And as adults, we are going in and out of alpha throughout a given day. So anytime you daydream, that's more alpha activity coming online. Anytime you watch a movie or a TV show and get drawn into the world that it takes you into, the fantasy world, or even, just escaping from everyday reality by absorbing yourself in that screen. Obviously the same happens with our phones, with video games, with books, etc. Anytime we're engaging in that type of activity where we're checking out of everyday life and what's happening right in front of us into some other world that the screen or the book takes us into. And so it's not a mystical state to have to reach in order to do the work, but it's definitely a different type of space that works more with imagination, emotion, and suspending disbelief, which is not necessarily needing things to make complete logical sense when we're working with the subconscious, because the subconscious and unconscious doesn't really care about logic. It cares about keeping you safe, and it works with emotion, which is why this part is fighting a losing battle so often. We know logically what we should be doing. We can have all the common sense in the world, yet it doesn't work. No matter how much logic we've got coming to bear, this is pushing back and often is more powerful. But as I said, it's not so hard. We just need to have experiences that tap into this alpha state, which the sorts of exercises I do with my clients simply invite an eyes closed in a guided experience. You might say a guided meditative experience or an experiential exercise to work with what's going on underneath the surface. And there's a variety of different approaches that offer that, my favorite being the internal family systems model, which will feature in future videos exploring why we have so much trouble making change. Anyway, I hope this video has helped some of you understand things a bit clearly, and there'll be more videos to come focusing on this same topic of helping you to overcome or understand why change is hard and what to do about it. Thank you.